friends. I'm Jennifer and I work at Vesterheim Norwegian American Museum in Decorah, Iowa. Decorah is located in the United States, in North America. And for those of us who live in North America, the weather is starting to turn a little bit colder. If you live in the Northern Hemisphere, such as the United States, Canada, even Norway, have you noticed the seasons are changing? Things are getting a little bit colder, and that means that we might have to change our clothing. Now in Norway, there's a saying that there's no bad weather, only bad clothing. So today I want to show you some warm clothing from the museum's collection, and it might look like some of the things that you have in your home. But first I want to share some Norwegian words with you. Now right now we are in the season called fall or autumn, and in Norwegian that word is høst. Can you say høst? Høst. Now we're starting to get more toward winter. The seasons are going to be changing again soon. And winter in Norwegian is vinter, vinter. It looks very much like the word winter in English, except for the V and the W are changed out. Well, as I said, we want to put on some warm clothing when the weather turns colder. And the word for warm in Norwegian is varm, varm. It looks a lot like the English word for warm. So we want to find some clothing that is varm. Now the word for clothing looks a little interesting. It starts with a K, which makes a K sound just like K, the C in clothing, but the Norwegian word is klær, klær. So if we want to have warm clothing, we have varme klær. Well, let me show you some of the warm clothing that we have in the museum's collection. I'm going to put on some gloves today. These gloves are going to protect the objects from the dirt and oils on my hands. So let me just put these on really quickly. All right, these are warm too. Well, first I have something that you might have in your closet. Do any of you have a sweater? This is a kind of Norwegian sweater, we like to call it. It's made out of wool, and it has some interesting patterns on it and colors. So there's blue and red and green and white and lots of different shapes that make up patterns. So I've got some diamonds and some X's, and there are these sort of little tiny V shapes here on the body and on parts of the sleeves. Well, did you know that sweaters were originally underwear? People would wear something like this, even bright and colorful, underneath their clothing. So I have a few pictures, some historical photographs. These are from people long ago wearing their sweaters underneath clothing. So this gentleman here has a sweater on. Maybe you can see that on his sleeves, but he has a vest on that covers up a lot of that sweater. So he's wearing it as kind of underwear to keep warm. This man here has a sweater on under his kind of fancy clothing here that would be a part of his bunad or his festive costume, folk costume, and his sweater is just peeking out on the sides. Well, it's not only adults that were wearing sweaters as underwear, but also kids. So here's a picture of a young boy who's also wearing a sweater more as underwear underneath his clothing. Well, eventually people started wearing sweaters on the outsides, like this little boy here. So he's wearing a sweater to keep warm in the winter cold. So we have sweaters today that are decorative, and we can see the decoration because we don't usually wear them as underwear today. Well, here's another small sweater, and this was a sweater for a child. Maybe you can imagine yourself wearing this sweater. It's red and it's white, so it's got red and white stripes. It's also made out of wool, and so it's very, very warm, even when it gets wet. That's the wonderful thing about wool. So if you wear this out in the snow, it will still keep you nice and warm. This sweater also has some fancy patterns on it that include some of those snowflakes or star patterns. And this also is a small sweater, so it'd be for a child, and it's a little bit different than the other ones. It's got some buttons up here on the top, because this is a pretty narrow neck, and I don't know if you could squeeze your head through that. So it unbuttons here on the sides so that you can get your head through it. And it has some interesting patterns on it, blue and red, and some interesting shapes all around, and some really fun cuffs. Stripes on them, and this waistband here too. So it's a small child's sweater. Now, the word for sweater in Norwegian doesn't look anything like the word sweater in English. So here's the Norwegian word, genser. Genser. Well, next, I wanted to show you some caps. These are some warm hats that you could wear in the winter time. This one also has some of those snowflakes on it, or star patterns or flower patterns. And this one's very fun. It has a little ball on top. And this was made for a child to wear out in the snow and the cold weather. It's made out of wool, very warm, and it has these kind of nice colors on it, blue and white. Here is another hat as well. This one also has one of those pom-poms or balls on top of it, and it has diamond patterns. It's also blue and white, but a little bit different color of blue, and has some X's that sort of make the diamonds, some zigzags. There's a lot going on this hat or cap. And I have one more cap to show you. Look at this cap. It has some fun patterns on it that are made up of little children or people who are joining hands. So this is a cap for a child or a kid, and it has kids on it. How fun is that? Well, the Norwegian word for cap is lua. Lua. So this is a varm lua. Well, last, you might need to have some mittens. Many of you might have mittens that help to keep you warm in the winter time and when you're out in the snow. These are some wool mittens for a child or a kid would be wearing these or did wear these. These also have snowflake pattern on them, or that star or flower pattern, and some of those stripes on here. These are gray and red. And so they make the patterns with different colored yarns. Also, here's some more mittens. These are kind of similar, but I wanted to show you especially the thumbs on these, because if I turn these over, can you see there's a little person on the thumbs? How fun is that? So you have these bright mittens. They won't get lost in the snow, and underneath is a special little decoration on them. And last, I have just some striped mittens, but I really love these because I like the colors and the patterns that are on here, but I also love it because these have been worn, and we can tell that because there's a little hole right here. Have you ever gotten a hole in your mittens? Well, the Norwegian word for mittens is votter, votter. Well, you can probably find lots of these clothes in your house, in your closets, especially if you live someplace where it gets very cold in the winter time. And some of your things might have a lot of decorations on them. They might be very colorful. Well, I have some sweaters and some mittens, different things that I have that I have made or decorated, and you can too. So you can go to the museum's website and you can download these patterns here, and you can create your own colorful and decorative mittens, caps, and also sweaters. So I have a couple of examples here to show you of what I decided to do or how I did that. So first, this is just an outline of the sweater, and I just used some markers to make different patterns and designs on them. That was pretty easy. Here's one of the markers I used, and I just made whatever I wanted to on this sweater here. This is kind of an interesting thing to do or to try. These are the mittens, and I decided that not only did I want to use some color, but I thought about pattern and texture. And so I gathered up some materials, things like some fabric that is a little rough, some netting that has kind of holes in it, some I found some cardboard that is rough and has some texture to it. And I created a board. Now you don't have to create a board. You can just lay these things out on your table. But I created a board, and then I kind of put, actually this way, I just set that paper on top of it and then took a crayon and rubbed back and forth, and patterns started to show up and texture started to show up based on what was on my board. So let me just show you how that works quickly here. So I'm just going to take a crayon and just set this down on my pattern. In fact, I think I'll just try some slightly different material here so that it's not on, maybe not on my board here, and we'll see how this turns out. So there's a little bit on here. It'll be hard to see, but there's some little tiny holes on here. And if I put this on the lace here, you can start to see some of the texture there. So maybe that's what you'd like to do to decorate your sweater. There's also some other options too. Some of you may have some stamps. Now, I have some different stamps. You can just ink your designs onto your sweater or your cap or your mittens. Or maybe you have a bunch of stickers like I do, and you could peel these off and you could just stick these right on to your sweater or your cap or your hat. It might look something like this. The possibilities are really endless. But I'm going to challenge you to use lots of color and think about things that you could either do or use to make patterns and texture on your sweaters, hats, or caps and mittens, so that maybe they look something like this or like this. Right. Well, stay warm, everyone, and take care, and we'll hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.